All right. Hi, everybody. And thank you for joining our Genius New York live chat. I'm Jeff Euchsberg, Director of Genius New York, and I'm joined by Kara Jones, Director of Communications at the Tech Garden, and Beverly Mack, Operations Manager at the Tech Garden behind the slides. And we're going to give you an overview to explain all that the Genius New York program has to offer, what you should be thinking about now, and what to expect later. We'll have plenty of time to answer questions at the end and post them to the chat at any time during the presentation. Kara has generously offered to change her name to Ask Me Questions, so you know where to direct your questions. And we could advance. There we are. So what is Genius New York? We're the largest startup accelerator for unmanned systems, IoT, and big data startups. We're a one-year in-residence program. This is not a virtual program. Naturally, we won't operate the program until it's safe to do so, and we think that you'll see the benefits of being here in person by the time we're through. We're funded by Empire State Development as part of CNY Rising, a larger $500 million upstate revitalization initiative supported by the state of New York. And Genius New York is just one piece of this unparalleled investment in unmanned systems, which we'll get into a bit shortly. But our location in Central New York is a huge part of what makes Genius New York truly unique in its value. We're also located just 5 hours or less from major world cities like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Toronto. And as many of you know, upstate New York is home to one of the largest clusters of top-tier research universities anywhere. Every year, Genius New York teams benefit from this tremendous pool of talent graduating when hiring. And along the way, we facilitate access to subsidized interns and co-op students, often at low or no cost to our companies. Additional incentives from New York State through Empire State Development include tax programs like Hotspot and Startup New York, where we have staff to help facilitate enrollment there. The UAS Job Fund, which is specific to creating permanent positions in the UAS industry in Central New York and the Mohawk Valley region, and organizations like UAS Central for networking within this industry. Lastly, Central New York is a great place to live and have fun in addition to work, and that's a big part of what we do at Genius New York here too. We want you to love Syracuse as much as we do, so that you can build a great team here that will love Syracuse as much as you do. So at a high level, Genius New York and its portfolio of companies have accomplished quite a bit in a short amount of time. We're now recruiting our 5th cohort of the competition, and to date, we've invested $12 million into 22 companies. Of those, 21 are still around. The one that is no longer around was actually acquired by a different Genius New York company. So we've had our first exit. 19 are still involved with the program, and you're likely to run into and be involved with if you're a part of Genius New York. And 15 still have staffed offices at the Tech Garden. We have 5 international companies. For each of the last 2 rounds, we've had 2 international companies per year, and they come from Australia, Israel, Italy, Switzerland, and the UK. So it's really, you can see now that, Genius New York is really you're a part of something big with a truly global footprint. And these teams are extraordinarily successful. $25 million in follow-on investment post-Genius raised by Genius New York teams. In addition to that, $7 million in non-dilutive government grant funding from programs where we can help you get plugged in and be successful. Last year, the 2020 competition received 400 submissions from 18 countries. We have shortened the application window this year to make up for some lost time versus when we ordinarily open the competition. And we're tracking to have an even higher application pool this year versus other years when we've had a longer amount of time. So people are still very much interested in Genius New York, and the program continues to grow. So at a high level, everything we do in the Genius New York program is designed to help your company maximize its success in Central New York. First, there's the competition prize funding that might well have been the first thing that grabbed your attention. $3 million at stake at finals night, with 4 teams leaving with $500,000 in investment and 1 team winning $1 million. We do receive an equity interest in exchange for the prize funding. It's a 10-year pre-funded warrant in exchange for 5 to 8% equity. And we can get into some questions about that towards the end if you have any. In addition, there's a tremendous amount of staff support, networking, mentors, and events that we'll get into in greater detail as we go. And really, we're building the fastest growing UAS startup ecosystem anywhere in the world. And New York State, as I've already mentioned, has a lot of incentives designed to support startups generally, and in particular, those in UAS. Investor demo days are a core part of what we do at Genius New York. Each round we do one locally and at least one out on the road. We've taken Genius New York teams to New York and Boston, in addition to holding high-profile investor events here in Central New York. Free office space at the Tech Garden, where again, you will find 15 other Genius New York teams officed. And before finals night, and we'll get into the flow of the program and how the funding works in a little bit, we provide $10,000 per month to the company as a stipend, as well as an $800 a month housing allowance to help you sort of, build your team and, get your roots established here before you start to draw down the finals night funding.
Of course, I have to unmute myself. Here we go. So we've had a lot of success with our Genius New York teams, but we wanted to call out 3 in particular, and some of you guys may have heard of these companies. Dropcopter was a 2018 winner from California. They provide services to growers using multi-rotor drones that dispense material over orchards. They specialize in pollinating apples, almonds, cherries, pears, and New York is actually the 2nd largest apple producing state in the country. So having an office at the Tech Garden made a lot of sense for Dropcopter. We were able to do a huge PR push for Dropcopter at a local orchard where they did the first world pollination of apples. This helped boost the company and even win $500,000 in another New York State competition called Grow New York in 2019. Automodality was our first winner of $1 million in 2017. They are the global leader in fully autonomous advanced robotics control software for UAVs and other small mobile robot systems. What that basically means is they have a control software that they use for inspection in GPS denied environments, and they do those inspections on bridges, culverts, or railroads. In 2018, they partnered with Union Pacific, who operates North America's premier railroad franchise. And they also, like Jeff mentioned before, acquired USPLM, a past Genius New York team, and recently raised $8 million. And lastly, Photokite, they were our $1 million winner in 2019 and one of our first international teams from Switzerland. Photokite's tethered solution, developed specifically for public safety, features fully autonomous flight without the need for a pilot, FAA licensing, or flight authorizations. They now operate their sales and manufacturing right here in New York State and recently partnered with Pierce Manufacturing and Exxon. The team also recently raised over $10 million in follow-on funding. So the next time you see a Pierce fire truck, be sure to look on top because there might be a Photokite. So as you may know, Genius New York is operated out of the Tech Garden incubator. This incubator houses over 100 high growth tech startups, and we've seen huge successes from current and past members in the last 10 years. When Genius New York teams graduate the 1-year accelerator, they have the option to become a full-time Tech Garden member, which 100% of them do. So here are 3 teams that we wanted to call out that have gone through the Tech Garden or are current members. Density is a current member who has a people counting technology. The devices are placed above entrances and doorways and by design collect no identifying information about the people they count. The company closed a $51 million round last year as they've seen a spike in sales as its technology is helping companies keep track of occupancy levels so they can safely open in COVID. They are now in fulfillment centers, distribution centers, casinos, grocery stores, etc., which is pretty exciting. They actually occupy our largest space at the Tech Garden in Syracuse, our hardware center. And in 2019, they actually moved all of their manufacturing from Texas to Syracuse, which was a big move for them. TCG Player is also a Tech Garden alum and a global online marketplace for trading card games like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering. Last year, they announced plans to create 150 full-time jobs over 2021 while expanding into other collectibles. In 2018, they also received $10 million from Radion Capital. And lastly, SpinCar, another Tech Garden alum, recently raised $22 million in growth equity from Wavecrest Growth Partners. They offer automotive dealers, OEMs, and online marketplaces the industry's most advanced platform for digital automotive merchandising. They do this by using a 360 walk-around technology. So those are just 3 of hundreds of successful startups in the Syracuse area. Companies in this region are scaling, they're hiring, they're raising funding, and they're truly growing our footprint as a successful interior innovation hub for businesses. You can learn more about all the members that we serve at the Tech Garden by going to our website, which I will put in the chat in just 1 second. Okay, so now that you know a little bit more about what's happening in our region and in terms of successful companies, I hope that you are indeed excited to apply and be a part of this program. Again, in the end, our jobs are really to help make your team successful. So who should apply? We look for startups or an existing business with less than 500K per year in revenue. Our preferred industries are unmanned systems or drones, robotics, IoT, and big data. We also want to note that during the program year, at least 2 full-time employees will be living and working in Syracuse. International teams should apply and are encouraged to apply. As we mentioned earlier, we've had 5 international teams in the program. You do not have to be a US citizen to apply, but you will have to be able to travel to the US with proper travel and work visas, as we are unable to sponsor your company. So let's move on to the application process.
So the application itself is fairly straightforward, and if you haven't completed step 1, it takes only 2 minutes, and we'll ensure that you receive reminders to complete your application, and of particular importance this year, any updates to the program as soon as they're available. One note there is that as long as you are in the system, you will get reminders about deadlines. So if you've completed your application and you continue to get reminders, that doesn't mean your application got lost in the system. It means we haven't manually removed you from the list of automated emails. So there is a human step involved, and as a sort of, belt and suspenders kind of move, usually with 2 weeks to go, if you've started an application and you haven't finished it, you can expect a phone call from somebody at the Tech Garden, making sure that you don't have any questions and you're going to go ahead and finish your application, because we want people to get those applications in. So a bit about step 1, just take care of that right after this meeting if you haven't yet. Then you get into step 2, that's really more of the substance of the application. And again, it's very straightforward questions. We're trying to understand where your technology is in its development, who your customers are, who your competitors are, and how you plan to become profitable. One note, the hiring plan is new this year, and there it's really, we don't want anything really too elaborate. We just want to understand who you plan to send and what you plan to build here. Really tying into, again, that 2-person minimum, that's new this year. And a note about the hiring plan. So the terms and conditions are still getting through final legal review. They will get posted shortly, and you will get a notice when they are available. There's really no surprises in there, and I can talk through them at the end if there are any questions. But basically, what we don't want to see is people saying they're going to create 100 jobs during this year, because that's highly unreasonable and ultimately not something you can hold people to. So we encourage people to be realistic, because this hiring plan will go into the funding agreement, and those are going to be basically the milestones that we set to draw down the funding. And it's not really an adversarial thing, as we've said numerous times throughout this presentation, and we will more. Our jobs are to make sure that you are all successful at what you're setting out to do here. So we have in the past adjusted milestones. Again, we're not setting up anybody to fail. We don't get to keep the money if we don't give it to the companies. We're not incentivized in that way at all. We are incentivized very much to make you all successful. So back to the application itself. The deadline, March 31st, 11:59 Eastern Time. No matter what happens with COVID or anything, that deadline is highly unlikely to change. So lock that in, set the time aside, even if, in the unfortunate event that, say, tomorrow the world starts to spiral out of control, that deadline is very likely still the deadline. And the judging criteria is also fairly straightforward. You're sort of, looking at that first block, it's sort of what you would expect us to inquire about. Have you identified a substantial business opportunity, and have you developed a compelling and scalable business model to capitalize on it? And are you supported by a team capable of executing? And from there, you're going to need to understand that we're not traditional investors with a singular focus on internal rate of return, but we're nevertheless highly strategic when it comes to the outsized impact that we're looking for. First and foremost, upstate New York has long been a leader in innovation, and we're looking for companies that will help keep us positioned at the forefront of tech innovation. Secondly, as I've mentioned, there are a number of startup community and regional priorities for our technology-based economic development. So one, as you are likely aware, has to do with unmanned aerial systems and unmanned aerial vehicles. So that's the first and foremost sort of core of the Upstate Revitalization Initiative that funds Genius New York. And really, this is unparalleled state investment into a single emerging technology sector. So in addition to Genius New York, we have the New Air Alliance, which is a coalition of industry and government experts in the unmanned aerial system space. They also manage the FAA-approved test site in Rome, also the 50-mile beyond visual line of sight corridor. We have more collaborators out towards Rome with the Air Force Research Laboratory and the Griffiths Institute, the Commercialization Academy there. We've had prior Genius teams go on to win at the Commercialization Institute, Commercialization Academy as well. So really building on our region's long-standing history in defense and aerospace and looking towards the future, Genius New York made a lot of sense to sort of plug in. Secondly, Syracuse is New York State's flagship smart city. And you may be aware of initiatives like the Syracuse Surge and ESD's Smart Cities grant program. So there were equivalent opportunities for companies to have unmatched support for success in those types of industries as well. And most importantly, back to where we started, we are trying to build the fastest growing UAS startup ecosystem anywhere in the world. Lastly, and certainly not least in 2021 of all years, we're looking for companies with the potential to create jobs in Central New York in our target industries now more than ever. It's obviously been a terrible year, record unemployment all over the world, and Genius New York is one of those programs designed to help stand certain key portions of the economy back up. So really it's always been a job-centric program, but now more than ever, the focus is really on companies that we think make sense here and can create jobs here. So long story short, in the application, your job is to really envision why Central New York is the best place for your company to be, and make sure that we see you're going to really thrive here with what you're setting out to do. And so moving on to the timeline and what to expect, March 31st, applications will close. Obviously everything, since last March comes with an asterisk, but we really do not expect that deadline to change. We're doing a pretty tight turnaround this year on the scoring. Usually about 3 weeks later, we finish the first round of review. All of the applications are scored by at least 3 independent reviewers. So it goes out to a very large panel of experts. We have domain experts in various technology fields. We try to find, people in startups or business management from adjacent industries. And we also find people from the investment community. So every application gets reviewed outside of Genius at least 3 times. Then it moves towards the executive advisors of the program, who again are a combination of government leaders, industry leaders, and startup investors. And they take the scoring from that first round and down select to the 15 to 20 semifinalists. And then there's an additional round where you will be, develop a video pitch and be available for a video interview with the executive advisors. And they're responsible for that down selection from the 20 semifinalists to the 5 finalists. And when we say finalist, you can really think of yourself sort of as a winner. No finalist has ever managed to not get their Genius funding. So if you notice, there are 5 finalists and then 5 winners at finals night, some 3 months later. So we used to say, once you're a finalist, you're in the money. Again, there are no guarantees, but no one's managed to not get their money. So back to COVID-19 management, the program start may be delayed. So as of now, the plan is to go ahead, pick our winners so that hopefully we are poised to bring companies in the second that reopening can be safely done. And if we can't at that time, we will likely just postpone companies arriving in Syracuse. So really, it's just we've got our plan in place, and that's likely how it's going to be. Every year, we pick 2 alternates, sort of just in case. We will likely be picking 5 alternates this year in case each company has a. I think we've all learned a lot about our COVID crystal balls not being great this past year. So just belts and suspenders. We're going to have 5 companies ready to go and 5 alternates in all likelihood. So the program timeline, again, it runs for a year, and we cover a lot of ground here, and really we've had those tremendous outcomes we summarized at the beginning, really working very hard alongside the teams and getting you all the support you need from our local business community to help you build something great here in Central New York. So starting out, it has 2 distinct phases. The first 3 months are very much like what you would expect from a typical startup accelerator. We do sort of have our own sort of regional flavor where we introduce you to Central New York and our local business community, because we want these teams to really have good business relationships in town, make a lot of sense to be here, and really from the get-go get plugged into the various state programs that will help them. Also, phase 1 is very much focused on finals night. That's the big pitch competition. That's our largest event of the year, and it takes a lot of work to get there. So we are talking about full staff support to help you harden up that business case, have a really wonderful looking pitch deck and 1-pager from some of our local graphic design firms, and hone your presentation skills so you can really have your company not just put their best foot forward at finals night, but be prepared to raise the follow-on capital that's going to get your company to profitability down the road. Last year, we were very fortunate. We were able to bring in world-class pitch coach Nathan Gold. Once we have some real confidence in the dates, we intend to bring him back, and really just a wonderful experience all around from all of the companies. And really just sort of incredible level of support that kind of starts with finals night and then continues. Finals night itself is a fantastic live event. Typically, we have 300 plus attendees, various business leaders, investors, entrepreneurs. We're fully expecting there to be some kind of capacity limit for large venue events. Who can really say? But typically, that happens about 3 months after the start of the program. And that's where the $3 million in funding is awarded. So you don't get the one big paper check that you can run to the bank. That's drawn down over the balance of the program year, months 5 through 12. And it's, again, issued on sort of a milestone basis and tends to be evenly metered for the duration of the remainder of the program year. But months 5 through 12 is really where we separate ourselves from other accelerators. We bring in workshops and speakers from our network ready to support you from everything from customer discovery to supply chain management to sales and marketing to import and export. We have mentors and business leaders in the community ready to help you be successful here. We like to sort of think of us as bringing the know-how and the know-who, and not just bringing in the HR and the law firms to discuss best practices for hiring, but we know that it can be a struggle to build a top tech team in a smaller city. So we're going to bring in founders and high-level executives from some of those companies we mentioned earlier that can come in and tell you how they did it, because it's no secret you can be successful anywhere if you know how to do it. So it's about connecting to everything that makes our region great and trying to make it greater. In addition to that, we're bringing in your typical support like accountants and law firms, but also product development experts, some of which may help you build out a network of local supply chain partners. Bringing in upstate New York early stage investors, representatives of our UAS ecosystem, and many others who want to help you be more successful here than you could be anywhere else. So last year, our finals went virtual. This year, it will be in person, but I would encourage you to go check out the virtual finals. It's still on the Genius New York YouTube channel. You can get a sense of how good you'll look if you work hard and take great coaching. You can get a sense for really maybe a little bit more of the breadth of what the program has to offer. And last but not least, some of the company founders and people that you can expect to be working with and running into if you are fortunate enough to be able to join the world's fastest growing UAS, IoT, and big data startup community. So
Okay,
I'd like
thanks,
to,
Jeff.
yep, and just reminder one last time, get those applications in. At least finish phase 1 today. That way you will get bugged, hopefully not too obnoxiously, but enough to make sure that you finish your application and get it in.
Perfect. So you can see our contact information below. If you guys have questions, please chat them to me right now and we'll be happy to answer them. I did have some questions come in. So Jeff, we talked a lot about UAS teams, but in terms of judging the applications, some technology is very technical and advanced. Will there be anyone reviewing applications that has some operations or technical background in the other areas like the big data and the IoT for those applicants?
So again, every application gets sent to a technical reviewer, a business leader, and an investor. When it comes to technical review, obviously a lot of this stuff can get very nuanced and over people's heads, but we haven't been stumped yet. We do have a very large network, and everybody in that network in turn has a large network. So when it comes to making sure someone understands your application, we haven't been stumped yet, and we'll do our part. But I would also sort of put out there, there's probably a lot you can do to make your information more accessible to people, because again, only one of those reviewers is going to be highly technical. So I would point people to a lot of federal agencies, tech transfer offices, and research universities. They put together great technology briefs that are 1 or 2 pages that generally kind of take this technology that might have taken a decade or more to develop and several millions of dollars, and really distill down the part that creates economic value, where you can really kind of focus on the commercializable aspects of the technology. Things like that. Y Combinator has a lot of great pitches that they post to the web, and I would call out HistoWiz has always been a favorite of mine. This is a young lady who started a digital sort of cancer pathology library, PhD from Harvard. Could clearly talk over everybody's head in the room, but doesn't, in order to make sure that she's effectively communicating very hard stuff in a very accessible way. And I'm not diminishing the challenge that is. It's actually very hard to do. And that's, I think, a big part of why we wanted to bring in someone like a Nathan Gold last year, who's really just a world-class communications coach. So it can be done, and really, again, when you're talking about your customers, feel free to provide information that would help us kind of steer to the correct reviewer, because it would be sort of on that basis. Who are the other people in the world who might care about what you're doing? Hopefully it's your customers. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Jeff. Another great question. The hiring plan is new this year. Would you say applicants are doing the hiring plan dependent on whether the award is 500K or $1 million if they win either one?
So feel free to speak to both. Again, it's kind of free form, open-ended, and once it goes to contract, it will resemble the legalese that will sort of be unambiguous. But for now, sort of the one thing I'd call your attention to is, again, we're about sort of creating jobs here, and again, for different companies, different arrangements will make sense. For some companies, it might make sense to bring the whole company here. For some companies, you might send a core team, and you're going to build out a North American headquarters if you're an international team. Some teams want to build out sort of a sales team here. Others, a development team of some sort for product. So really, if you can provide some definition there, and for the $1 million, we do require that, basically a founder, C-level executive, or some other, high ranking person of the leadership team that we would otherwise approve, be here in Central New York for the program year. But it's really up to the company for what will best position them for success and convince us that that's what makes the most sense.
Thanks, Jeff. A two-part question. So how much time would you say the program requires each week? And kind of part two of that is, if you have some team members not living right in Syracuse, is that enough, or do they have to be present in Syracuse in central New York?
So we do require in-person participation in program activities. That said, we understand that startups typically run lean and have a lot going on, and we don't require perfect attendance, but when it becomes an issue, we do sit down, and there haven't been many. I think one comes to mind, but we try to be respectful of the fact that what you're doing is very hard, and ultimately we're there to help and try to help you succeed, and nothing's really intended to be a burden or busy work of any sort. I'd say on average, you could probably expect to, something in the 10, 12 hour range, and it will be, a mix of, workshops and presentations to, we do, again, try to have fun, try to bring all the Genius teams past and present together. We do try to, make sure that you fully appreciate all that Central New York has to offer in terms of a place to live, work, and play. And I will say that it's also a bit more intensive, during the first 3 months of phase one. But it's really, again, it can be a lot of it structured to what makes sense for you. Ultimately, in phase one, we want to make sure that your business plan is essentially bulletproof, your pitch deck and your one pager look fantastic, and you can go out there and pitch and raise like nobody's business. Because it's, A, that's what it takes, and B, I don't think anyone's expecting 2021 to be a particularly easy year for fundraising.
Yeah. I just want to remind everyone too that we do accept international applications, so it could be from Canada, Australia, Israel. We're open to the globe. So Jeff, another question just came in. How early stage is early? Is being revenue positive and having many customers a key factor in the decision-making process for who can be in Genius?
I mean, certainly validation always helps. It will never hurt you to have, some sort of, demonstrable market acceptance of what you're doing. That said, we do take very early teams. We have had companies that had a patent filing and really hadn't even reduced it to practice or had anything tangible yet. So it's really all about, again, what you're doing, how well you fit with the community that we're trying to build here, and the potential that we see down the road. Otherwise, we would just pick the 5 companies that had either already raised the most money or had the highest revenues. So it's really, it's more than just by the numbers, to be sure.
Can you talk a little bit about housing? Is housing included? Do we help with housing for companies not located in central New York already?
So we do provide assistance. There's financial assistance as part of the Genius New York funding. So the stipend and the housing allowance during phase one are actually not incorporated into the warrant. So that is sort of like free and clear support money for your company. And then we also have people who will help you find a place to live that's suitable for you. Again, part of sort of at the high level, organizational level, Genius New York is a program run out of the Tech Garden by Center State CEO, which is basically our region's large economic development engine with a very broad business network. So we can provide assistance when it comes to finding employment for spouses or significant others. We can provide assistance when it comes to finding an apartment. We've had people who had apartment requests who needed certain accessibility conditions. Again, we are really very much in the business of giving you what you need to be successful. Our former program coordinator, who's moved on to bigger and better things, would frequently take Genius teams, when they first arrived here on their first grocery run because they didn't have cars yet. Again, it's the big things, it's the little things. We want you to get here and thrive here, and that's kind of what we're all about. And again, we also are fully cognizant of the fact that not everything fits a drop-down pre-populated menu. Come see anybody on staff with anything you may need, and we will do our best to figure out how to accommodate you.
Had a quick question about reference letters. I know they're optional on the application, but do you prefer them? How many would you like? Anything on that?
If you have people that you want to, vouch for you, again, back to sort of, I guess, the question that came up earlier. If you got sales contracts, that's great. Short of that, letters of intent are great. Short of that, letters of support are great. References are great, particularly if it's from someone who is, again, a key opinion leader or a subject matter expert or representative of, your class of customers. We check the references. We see who it's from, and we don't check 100% of them, but when when it gets closer to the wire, we absolutely will call the references. So only put them down if you actually call them in advance and let them know that people might be calling.
Are people able to apply if they have an existing business?
Yeah, again, they kind of run the gamut, other than this is a startup competition. So yeah, and you'll find, if you've ever tried to research, various area, different agencies will have different rules for what that is. We don't really act on an exclusionary basis. Really, the only one bar is under $500,000 cumulative in revenue. That's sort of the one that we stick to, just to make sure that it's an early stage company. But again, there's really, I don't think there's any such thing as too early. We have entertained very early companies. We have entertained people who hadn't started a company yet, but would form it, if they got into Genius. And, obviously the big caveat there is we cannot pay natural persons. You will need a company in order to get any of this funding.
There's a couple of questions coming in about getting a US visa and how people should go about doing that. I know that I mentioned we don't currently sponsor teams, and we do expect you to be able to work in the US. But is there anything, Jeff, that you wanted to add to that comment?
I will say that we've managed to make it work with every international team we've ever dealt with. I am not an expert in immigration law. I'm not even a novice in immigration law. But again, back to our network that will help you get the job done. We've managed to get 5 Genius teams fully paid out and hiring up people in Central New York that started their journey from other countries. It's just one of those, we're getting very much out of anyone's area of expertise right now, but we've managed to make it work in the past. But no, we cannot actually go ahead and do any of the sponsorship.
Okay. Another question just came in. Do we like deep tech? We're in UAM and maybe a few years before the market arises.
I mean, we have 2 UTM companies in our portfolio. We are not afraid of, not quite even yet emerging markets. I don't know too many accelerators with 2 UTM companies in their portfolio. So again, we have a long-term vision for what we are trying to build here and what the pieces and parts are. So absolutely. And I guess to that point, UTM is sort of a curious exception, and the 2 companies that we've backed are not redundant to one another. Back to sort of the one likely exclusion criteria is if you are truly duplicative of what prior Genius New York team is doing, that probably would not help your application. So
Jeff, who are the UTM companies?
Who? Resilience and Sky Network. So Resilience was one of our sort of local winners. There's always been this sort of informal local spot that we've never had to enforce. They've always just sort of, won on the merits, I think, just because of the, the ecosystem that we have here. And then the other is from Australia. And again, back to the network and building it, one of the referrals came from the other Genius company.
Great. So we will be emailing this presentation to everyone who registered today. If you have more questions, please, please, please let us know. You can email us at any time at genius@thetechgarden.com. We're on Facebook. You can Facebook us. You can tweet at us. But again, applications are due March 31st. And if you guys have any questions, you know how to get a hold of us.
And in closing, also remember, please check out the Genius New York website for more information.
Mm-hmm.
And as it's updated, if you fill out phase 1 of the application, you'll be notified. And also, again, check out some of our regional collaborators. Again, New Air Alliance, UAS Central, if it's sort of core to what you're thinking about. And again, Genius New York is actually very much closely associated with UAV and UAS. But I do want to call out, as much as I said, alignment to smart cities and, this URI. Last year we had 2 non-drone companies. One was doing robotics for retail and hospitality. The other was building digital twins. So it's not the be all and end all. And we are very much open to other companies doing other things that make a lot of sense here in Central New York. So I didn't want to give that impression. That said, there's always been at least 3 in the UAV or UAS space.
Okay. We will talk to you guys shortly when you get this email. Thanks so much, and we look forward to getting your application.
Start the application, finish the application. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.